Good afternoon, everyone. Perhaps good morning, depending on where you're joining from, and welcome back to today's Biotech Leaders Agenda, focused on partnerships and deal making. We just heard from, I guess, a specific subset of partnering around broad platform companies, and earlier about partnerships around the pandemic. And now we move on to I guess, more therapeutically agnostic focus on early stage pharma partnering. And delighted to have a panel together of some of the largest and most active pharma in the world and across Europe, particularly. And yeah, lots to dig into here. Lots of questions, I'm sure, from the audience. So please do keep those coming in the Q&A and chat functions on the right-hand side of the video here. Yeah, that's it from me. Delighted to hand you over to our moderator, who's going to be guiding us through the session, Madeleine Armstrong. So Madeleine, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Josh. So hi, I'm Madeleine Armstrong. I'm the news editor of Evaluate Vantage, and welcome to the session on early stage pharma partnering, strategy change, or just the new normal. So today with me, I have the panelists, Susanna Obad from Roche, Miriam Frieden from Novo Nordisk, Phil Louillier from Merck, and Tim Luca from Lilly. So yes, just a reminder that you can ask questions on the platform. So I'll be asking those as we go along. So send them in as soon as you think of them. We're not saving them till the end. But I do have questions of my own to kick off. So I think to start with, I think it's fair to say that 2020 was a year like no other. So maybe we could start with talking about the challenges you all had during the pandemic in sourcing and connecting with potential partners and how you overcame these challenges. So Susanna, should we start with you? You're just the top of the screen there.
Of course. Thank you for the question and happy to kick it off. I think when the pandemic started for us in Switzerland, it was in March and it was very abrupt. It was literally from one day to the other, we were in a lockdown. I think what helped us to overcome these challenges, which was getting into a virtual setting quite immediately, was that we are a global BD team. So we are in some way used to working in a virtual format. And I think another point that also helped us to overcome these challenges working in a virtual environment is that we could build on existing relationships with potential partners where we already had built a trust. And then it was easier to transfer those discussions into a virtual setting. And I think we should also keep in mind that we all had a common goal. We wanted to make it work. We had an open mindset and we did what it took in order to make this virtual setting work. But happy to hear from the other panelists on your struggles and your challenges and what you did to overcome this.
What about you, Miriam? How did you find things at Novo?
So first of all, it happened about the same time in March, when actually we had a broad delegation. I think it was 30 people that was supposed to travel out to San Francisco for a partnering days. And that was canceled from one day to the next, right? And that was really a kind of a reality check that we needed now to adapt to the new norm, right? And so I mean, that's what we did, right? So we became very active, leveraging our existing contact base. We basically turned in our scouting efforts into digital efforts. And it's really not the same, but I think we've been able to maintain our metrics, our deal flow. We conducted a phase 2 stage acquisition deal, basically through virtual engagement. So it can be done. But I think maybe one comment is that many of the negotiations and discussions we had in 2020 had already a relationship foundation, right? So we had already met face to face. We already had trust. We already liked each other, right? I think it's going to be interesting to see what will happen from now on, right? And right now we have actually some ongoing discussions where we've never met. But somehow we've been able to create this intimacy and trust between the two teams. But I don't know if you can do it with all discussions, but at least so far we've managed.
Okay. What about you, Phil?
Well, very similar experiences to what Susanna and Miriam have described. You know, to state the obvious, and I'm sure this has been said many times, we rapidly transitioned from face-to-face interactions to the virtual world. And that's across the whole gamut. You know, it's not just this type of conference, but our external one-on-one and our internal meetings. But like the others have said, we work globally anyway, so that helped us with the technology. One of the things that I miss that we can't get now is what I call the accidental collisions. At a conference like this, face-to-face, the accidental collisions can be just as important as the formal meetings. And people like LSX have set up wonderful systems for these virtual meetings, and they are working well for the formal meetings, but the informal interactions are something that we don't have. We were able to get on and do work out how to do diligence and you know, deal with on-site diligence and those sorts of things virtually, and got more deals done in 2020 than 2019. So we were able to get the basics right, but oh boy, I'm looking forward to the day that we can sit around a table with a microphone each in these sorts of panels and conferences.
And would you say you've had a similar experience as well?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, it was quite dramatic when it all happened back in February, because I was on quite a complicated business trip that was London to New York, New York to Seattle, and then back home. And I was about halfway through, and one of them was to close quite a big deal for Lilly. And suddenly flights were getting cancelled and lots of news feeds were coming in. And I got about halfway and then had to come home. And that kind of forced us to move that deal to virtual to get it finished, which we did, which was interesting. But yeah, no, in general, I mean, we're part of a global team. You know, our team's in San Francisco, Boston, London, Japan. We've invested in lots of different venture funds and companies, you know, about 400 biotechs around the world we've got part ownership of through Lilly. So we are used to sort of the virtual world, you know, in a global company. So we were kind of half set up for this. And I think, as Susanna and the others have said, you know, we have deep networks after doing this job for a few years. So we were able to keep that momentum going. I guess the area we probably talk a bit more about later was how to get new relationships and, you know, not miss out on hot innovators that we don't know. But yeah, in general, we also pivoted. We're also grateful to, you know, LSX and others for helping that journey. I guess we were all a little bit reticent at the start of the year that whether this was going to work, but it's all part of the new normal, which is obviously the title of this sort of panel. So yeah, I mean, it's been a great year for us too. I probably closed more deals last year than I've ever done in my career. It was a very busy year, lots of interesting things, but you know, if I'm really honest, some of that momentum was started the year before. So it does remain to be seen what happens maybe next year. Hopefully we'll be a bit more back to normal with vaccines and things.
So that seems like a common thread then, that a lot of the deals you closed last year were kind of existing relationships. So how long do you think the current situation can go on then without it causing problems like for deals that are filtering through for the future?
It's hard to predict, Madeleine. I mean, as I said, I think most of the deals we closed in 2020 had already a face-to-face interaction, and both the scientific teams and the BD teams, they knew each other. So then it was somehow easy to transition into a virtual setting. But to be fair, we have 2 ongoing diligence and contractual negotiations where we've never met face-to-face. And while it probably takes longer to discuss the science, especially discuss contractual matters back and forth, it probably takes longer also because you don't set out maybe complete days for doing so. It can be done. And I mean, we've been able to really build trustworthy and good relationship with those companies, even virtually. But I mean, fair point. I don't know if that can be done generally, or we've just been lucky with those.
Back in, sorry, I was going to say back in March, April, I was naively concerned that pipeline and opportunities, as Tim said, new opportunities would dry up, but we haven't actually seen that. But nonetheless, in the back of my mind, it still does worry me about getting to know the new innovation, the new companies out there, and building relationships. As the panel has said, we had networks and we've worked with those networks, and we already knew those people, but building a virtual relationship and turning that into a transaction with new companies, I think, is going to be a little bit harder as we go forward.
Susanna, you were going to say?
I think all of this, yeah, sorry, thank you. Now, I think all of this will come to its test now after JP Morgan, because as mentioned, most of us, the deals that were ongoing, the collaborations, the relationships that were, they have been closed. We have entered these partnerships, and echoing my colleagues here on the panel, Roche also had a very successful year in the sense that we closed 92 new partnerships. So let's see how it comes from JP Morgan. And another sort of twist to it also, I felt that many of the negotiations, since it was virtual and with new partners that were across the Atlantic for us in the US, we could actually use the time zone differences much more efficiently than previously. You didn't come over to US and you were completely jet lagged sitting in a room. You maybe weren't at the top of the game, but while they were sleeping, we could turn around the agreement, the red line, and then vice versa. We sent it to them, we slept, and then it was read in our email box when we woke up the next morning. So while there are pros and cons with each situation, and certain negotiations became more efficient, but I can completely understand the due diligences and on-site visits to see the labs, the facilities, maybe doesn't work in this virtual setting.
Yeah, I
mean, maybe another. Oh, go ahead.
I think it's important that everyone hears that, you know, we are, I mean, most of us, I'm sure many would concur, we are driven by exciting science and giving benefit to patients who are obviously waiting for these treatments. And we are totally open for business, and we will do whatever it takes to close the right deals. So if that means calls in the middle of the night or slightly unusual circumstances, certainly at Lilly, we're all up for that. You know, teams get activated in hours sometimes when things are that important. And not all of our deals this last year were actually existing. A good proportion of them were actually new ones. To be fair, there were a few contacts or people who knew people who knew people. So, you know, but that's always the case. But I would say that we are totally open for business, and we will get through this. And we are here to close exciting deals and support exciting companies. And I guess some of this is also to do with the hot financial marketplace, which we'll come on to, I'm sure. But you know, even though there are some challenges in the world, the financial challenges for great companies perhaps are a little bit less because there's a lot of money around. So, you know, these different aspects ebb and flow with different times. No one wants a pandemic, but there have been some fairly bleak financing years over, you know, the past decades as well. So I think it is a good time if you've got a great hypothesis and a good team to pull together an exciting story, and we will definitely be interested. And there is, you know, money and a will around. So there is a positive message in all of this too.
Miriam?
Yeah, just a quick note. I think just also to kind of focus on the positive, I think what we've seen during COVID is that maybe larger availability of senior stakeholders. So we've kind of abused them and exposed them to opportunities maybe earlier and more than we would normally do. So that's maybe a positive of the whole situation.
Okay, that kind of leads me on to my next question, actually. I was going to ask if there's anything that you prefer to the current environment, COVID environment, to how it was before, what you'd like to take through when this is all over. If anyone else has got any comments on that.
Perhaps just to state one of the obvious things is that I see us using more a mix of virtual and face-to-face when we're through this. We've found we're actually able to do quite a lot of stuff virtually. The negotiation that Susanna mentioned and the time zones as an example. So I think it'll be easier to do more virtually afterwards. Not totally virtually like we are now, but a better mix of the two.
I think one change that we have also observed and seen is not only how we do these business discussions or scientific discussions with partners, but what changes also maybe who we partner with and who we work with, something that maybe pre-pandemic would not have been thought but sort of now we have also done collaborations with some of the industry competitors. So Roche entered, for example, into a collaboration with Regeneron to together try to fight and commit to the COVID. So two sort of, in one way, competitors in the industry getting together, breaking down the silos, making a commitment and trying to get medicines to patients in a quicker and more committed way. That's also something that's new, I would say, and hasn't really been happening in the past. And that's something that I hope will continue also after the pandemic, that getting together more closely and work together to bring medicines to patients.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of that with the vaccine development recently, I think, companies teaming up. But do you think that's a special case because it's COVID? You know, will that happen in the future once this is over?
I think it will. I mean, elements will, because, I mean, Lilly were able to take an idea to an emergency approved antibody for neutralizing COVID, I think pretty much in 9 months, start to finish, which is amazing. You know, these are multi-year development plans usually and discovery phases before that. So I'm sure a lot of companies are thinking, actually, if we have great projects, we can get them to patients a lot more quickly, which I think actually is a good thing. You clearly can't run an entire company like that, but when things like that, it does show what the world can do and what companies can do with good teams and resources when they really want to put their mind to it. It does cost money, and I'm sure other things. I have to say, actually, in Lilly, even though all of that was going on for COVID, the disruption to the general business actually of other important disease areas wasn't substantial, but all of my projects continued, and I saw progress in our pipeline across the company. So it really was a good story, actually.
Okay, so Tim alluded to this, but I also wanted to talk, sort of moving away from COVID, about the very strong venture financing climate that we saw in 2020 and the strong IPO market. You know, there are some very early companies now going public, some that are preclinical and look set to stay that way for quite a while. So how has that sort of influx of money affected your ability to strike early stage deals? Who wants to start that one? Sorry.
I can start. I mean, good companies are always, it's always competitive to work with the best people. So some elements, we always take partnerships very seriously and want to get the best of both sides of an equation. But it is true that companies can raise, multi-years worth of money and also potentially have a line of sight to even bigger IPOs coming if they do well as well. So they don't always sort of need a pharma partner early. But I think some companies do benefit because they can't have all of the divisions of a pharmaceutical company early. So we can do a lot of the planning that would come next as part of the collaboration. So it's kind of seamless all the way through, which can accelerate programs and add a lot of value. Otherwise, companies do need to build all of this from scratch, and some companies want to, others don't. But I think, in the later stages, whereas companies would be looking to partner with early data sets, some of those, I think some of our executives have been on record saying, they say, sorry, but we've just raised 200 million. We'll probably flip that card ourselves and then talk later. So it may push some deals a little bit later, but we still find good ways of striking interesting partnerships with really great companies. But there has to be maybe the details of the strategic need on both sides comes out a bit more than perhaps they used to when it was maybe just driven by money.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you make an important point there, Tim, that the key to a pharma biotech relationship is not just about the money, is it? There's the expertise and the contribution that we bring, as well as, in some cases, the resource in kind and money, of course, to build a collaboration. So that in some ways they're slightly different things. But I do agree, as Tim said, companies have money, and that enables them to have choices and consider going on their own for longer. That in some cases that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the industry. It's a good thing for patients. Just that projects are funded and money is available to progress those projects.
Yes, I concur with.
I was going to say probably the same, Miriam, as you, but I can only agree with Phil and with Tim that while there is an attractive, strong financial environment at the moment that exists, and raising the private and public funding is an attractive alternative to companies that they can remain independent for a little bit longer. But at the end of the game, it's also what is the best home for the medicines to make sure that the medicines can go all the way and come to the patients. And maybe when you are in business discussions with a biotech, They don't feel that sort of the financials or obligations or rights that they get are the right ones at the time. So they rather walk away, as Phil said, because they recently raised 200 million and do it on their own. In one way, it's a good thing. They continue to validate the asset or validate the technology, which also at the end of the day becomes more attractive to the pharma because it's more de-risked and validated. But it still comes down to having the infrastructure, which maybe the big pharma can provide when it comes to manufacturing or commercialization, development, all of these things. And it is about finding the right home. At Roche, for example, our R&D pipeline, 50% of the pipeline comes from external partnerships. 40% of our pharma sales are from partnerships. And in the last decade, out of the 20 launch products, we have 15 that originate from partnered medicines. So not that I'm biased in any way, but Roche is a good home for your medicines. So that's sort of something that the biotech needs to also take into account. Who is your best partner to actually go all the way? Not only the short-term thinking that I got my 200 millions and I can go X of the way. Sorry, Miriam, I was interrupting you before.
No worries, Susanna. I concur with what Susanna, Phil, and team are saying. We've seen both biotechs that decide to go solo and bring their asset to a higher value inflection point, and they prefer not to partner at that point. That's perfectly fine, as my colleagues are saying. We've also seen companies that basically follow a dual strategy, right? So they decide to keep one product and focus on that one and bring it to a higher value inflection point, and maybe partner on something else where they would benefit from a partner. And for example, when you play in the cardiometabolic space like we do at Novo Nordisk, partnering with pharma, I would say it's a good thing, and it doesn't hurt to do it early. And we see that this is acknowledged and well received by partners.
It is quite an unusual time, though, I have to say, that especially because I deal with a lot of platform technology companies that have got so much promise, but I think the market backs them financially on potentially delivering on all of that promise. And we've obviously seen a few eras of different platforms. Some went well, some went not so well. So it is interesting to see companies doing enormous IPOs with not really even a product concept in some cases to drive value. And I think maybe some of those won't be able to generate a lot of positive news flow to keep their share prices going up. So it will, I mean, great companies will go all the way, but I think very early, very substantial IPOs with no products could be saving up some tricky times, I would guess. But yes. I must say I'm more an optimist. I love these exciting breakthrough platforms that can open up new biology and new ways of new types of drugs. And I'm usually assuming that they're going to go well, but you have to be a bit of an optimist in this game, I think.
Okay, we've had a couple of questions from the audience. So let's go for the first one from Douglas Kawahara. Do you find that with more financing available, small companies will push more for regional deals?
I think we see all sorts of negotiation and wishes and requests from biotech as we work with them. And that's also based on if it's cell therapy, gene therapy, is it a small molecule platform, is it an asset with multiple indications? It all depends on what it is that we are talking about. But at the end of the day, I think we still need to look at, we speak closely and have conversations with our scientists, what matches with our portfolio, what can complement our portfolio based on indication, stage, and whatever it may be, and also what brings the best value to the patients at the end of the day. So it's, at least for me, hard to say one straight answer, black and white, on this regional deal topic.
Yeah, certainly at MSD, I don't think I've seen that as a trend. In fact, I was thinking, has it gone the other way? Regional deals tended to be a way for companies to finance themselves in the past, and then that sometimes created an issue for pharma companies where we usually want global rights. So is there less need to do regional deals because of the financing situation? They may be driven by other strategic reasons, of course.
I think it's a case-by-case basis. Clearly, our preference is global rights, no split indications, no strange things to manage, and small companies may not always be able to do effectively the commercialization of a medicine, which obviously costs a lot of money. But you know, the later the asset, I guess, and the more, I mean, everyone needs to have a win out of these deals, and if depends on the market size, the number of patients, the type of product it is. So, but in general, of course, our preference is simple global rights. Lilly drives the commercialization of the product. I mean, I agree with Phil. I haven't seen that trend, but I couldn't say that we've never done a deal with some aspects of that.
Miriam, looks like you agree with Phil and Tim.
Yes, I haven't seen that trend, especially not with early partnering. When it comes to more mature assets, yes, of course, that can be part of the discussion.
Yeah. Okay, so another question from Dinesh Agara. Hopefully I've pronounced that right, sorry. What are some unique partnering challenges as regards drugs versus biologics versus medtech and at a platform level, data partnerships and technology partnerships?
I didn't quite get the question, Madeleine. Maybe someone else.
I think it's about the challenges between drugs and biologics and also medtech and also technology and sort of data-driven partnerships. So what are the unique challenges for each of those areas, I think?
I think we could probably talk for half a day on all the different nuances of those areas. I mean, clearly there are, with data, there are a lot of hidden compliance and ethics issues that need to be handled, and who owns what and what companies are allowed to do or not do with various sets of data. It's a bit beyond my personal expertise, but those things, we have people to do all of that stuff. I'm sure most companies are trying to find the best patient populations or understand new pathways from human clinical samples, but that has to be done in a very careful and ethical way, which we take very seriously. All of the different modalities and platforms have different nuances around, I guess, IP, what you're actually licensing, which indications you're allowed to work on, which diseases. That all comes through in the discussions, the negotiations, and the contracting. Some can be fairly torturous. Some are pretty straightforward. So I guess it's quite a broad question to be able to answer crisply, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But we are able to handle all of those areas, and we have been through that journey multiple times. So none are insurmountable challenges.
Okay, that sounds like a big topic. Maybe one for another panel, John. So the next question from Caroline Toulemond: how do you optimize the match between the pharma and the biotech in terms of strategic fits? Is this a question about culture, perhaps, between pharma and biotech?
I'm not. It's a question.
Yeah, I think it is. So how do you find?
Miriam, you go first this time because I went first last time we both spoke.
Fair enough. Thanks, Susanna. I think it's a question. I mean, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I think it's about having a very candid dialogue with biotech in terms of the value drivers, right? So what's important for us? What's important for them? Where do you see the risks? Where do you see kind of the next value inflection points? And really be very candid around that and share it. I think that's important to build the trust and also a kind of a platform for understanding and driving then the contractual discussions around it, right?
And I think to build on what Miriam said, it also comes down to what is the expertise that the biotech is bringing in, expertise and capabilities. And what can we as a pharma company, each pharma company has different also expertise and capabilities. And how do these two meet? Because at the end of the day, we want to tailor each collaboration to its most optimal setting. And that only happens when we take into account the science, what they bring to the table and what we bring to the table. So again, coming back to what Miriam said, just a very candid and open discussion can help in guiding the path on this.
And perhaps just to add, there's the people component, you know, getting to know the team on the other side, and the communication. I echo what you said there, Miriam.
Obviously, trust as well. I mean, I'm sure everyone says this, but there's always dark times in projects, especially research projects that aren't clear cut what's going to happen. So contracts are often pulled out in the bad times. So I think having a good level of trust and camaraderie and common goals and all the usual things, they sound just like chat, but actually you do need these things to be in place when the slightly rougher times come, or there's budget overruns or surprising results. So I think hopefully we choose good partners, a bit like we choose friends and life partners, in a way that you want to be there for the good times and the bad times, I'm sure.
Okay, this is an interesting question, and it alludes to what you, it kind of goes back to what you alluded to earlier, Tim, about finding sort of new companies that you weren't aware of before. So given your concern over not being able to continue finding good deals, are you open to early stage startups cold contacting you or contacting you via third-party consultants?
Yeah, I mean, we have, hopefully I'm fairly visible. My team is visible. Lily's website is visible. We're at every major partnering event. My inbox and chat functions is continuous stream of people getting in touch, and we love that. We want to hear from the best people, and I want to try and help everybody. I can only apologize if I'm a bit overwhelmed sometimes, but generally we want to be contacted and we want to help. Clearly we have a strategy, and there's we will try to tell you quickly if it isn't now, or perhaps it's not a strategic fit for our company. But yes, in general, please, if you think you can help, and it would be good to just have a look at roughly our website and the sorts of areas that overlap. There's certain areas like currently Lilly doesn't manufacture vaccines, so if you have a vaccine play, it probably won't do too much good contacting me. But there's plenty of other core capabilities at Lilly and areas of science we are interested in for partnering at certain stages. So just take a look, do your homework, look at some of the other deals we've done, and please get in touch.
Okay, it sounds like the rest of you you're nodding along, so I think you're also quite open to be contacted in that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very much so.
So the next question.
I think we're all open.
Oh, sorry, Susanna.
No, I was just going to say, I think we're all open to early stage partnerships. That is one of the foundations. And the same as everyone, we attend all the partnering events, smaller ones, big ones, Bio US, Bio Europe, JP Morgan. So you can always find us there, and the same as Tim, and I think it goes for Miriam and Phil as well. Just go into our webpage and you will find who to contact. You can also see what our interest areas are, and we're always open talking to you.
It's probably important to add that a lot of conversations don't just start when there's a deal to be done. We're actually having conversations over, sometimes a couple of years with a new company, providing guidance on what we might be looking for as they develop the program. And it takes some time to then get to the point where we want to do a deal. So I would just add that it's not just, so to speak, when you think it's the right time to do a deal. We're very happy to have a very early conversation and help build towards something that is potentially a better program, a better asset, and meets our needs.
Absolutely. I think this is a very valid point, Phil. I mean, we're more than happy to engage in a dialogue, provide our expertise, our advice, or at least our perspectives as for how to go about drug development and drug discovery. And we're more than happy to engage at that point. And as Phil was saying, I mean, it's not you start a dialogue and then the day after you close a deal. That's not how it is, right? You build the relationship, you follow the progress, and eventually you make a deal.
Probably also worth saying just how to approach as well. I mean, I've been on the sell side and the buy side, so but a simple few bullet points around why it's exciting, what's different about it. Basic rules of pitching is all over the internet. You can get some help there if you've never done it before, but just a very short summary about what you're working on, why it's important, what's different about it usually suffices. On the other extreme, we don't need 13 papers, 100 slide deck, and like 20 of my colleagues all carpet bombed with the same information, because we're all joined up inside the company, so we all know this is happening as well. So we can help each other a little bit. We try to be helpful and crisp with our feedback and timely. And on the other side, perhaps if you could sort of keep a short summary that gives us the first information we need to make a decision, so that we can help you not waste time or get more involved quickly. That's probably maybe good advice as well.
Okay. The next question is, what are your other sources of finding opportunities? So we've talked about your existing relationships. We've talked about maybe getting approached, cold contacting, but where are your other sources of deals? Where does it all come from?
I mean, we try everything really. I mean, we do database searches, literature searches, patent searches. We engage also with academia, with early incubators, with, I mean, you name it, we try it, right? So it's really about building relationships at multiple levels and engaging, basically, broadly speaking, with the community, with the ecosystem. We also have our own commissioned events where we also bring out delegation of scientists to expose them to the science and have really kind of a deep dive in a specific ecosystem, right? So we try different things, and it's really to be out there, meet bright people, meet the good ideas, and interact.
I mean, we invest in a lot of venture funds at Lilly, like other people's venture funds that have themselves access to a lot of innovators and create a lot of biotech companies. So that's a little bit different to most companies just having their own corporate venture. We've taken a sort of complementary approach, but other than that, I agree with Miriam. We'll go into clusters, go to events, focusing on people with a track record in the past, people who, I like to obviously know people who know a lot of people themselves, because I've only got so much bandwidth myself. So the more people I know that know a lot of people sort of amplifies a little bit. But in general, same as Miriam, we try everything to try and find great ideas.
Okay, I think we're getting quite a few questions through. So if I move on to the next one, sorry, I'm just going to read it out. This is a question coming from a university startup. Oh no, sorry. So for a university startup company, the university has the IP. Would pharma like the small company to license the technology before seeking big pharma partnership? So it's a question about IP. If the university has the IP, would the pharma partner prefer the small company to take that over before partnering? I guess the answer to that would be yes.
Yeah, the short answer is yes, just on the face of the question, but there's perhaps more behind it. But yes, if we're collaborating, then we in general want to see that entity, that organization, holding the IP that is maybe under option or license as part of a collaboration to us.
Okay.
I would,
sorry, Tim. Yes.
I would say if you can afford it, to get good lawyers that know what, you know, market level terms are for the various things, because we have walked away from a few deals where the license agreement was very poorly done with punitive terms that we would have to take on to do a deal with the company. So don't try to come up with a, you know, we're used to reviewing license agreements, and we do that as part of our diligence process on any company. What we don't want to see is that they promised enormous royalties that, you know, we would have those on top of the royalties that we're paying to the biotech company, because stacked royalties will kill a commercial deal in many cases, and unless it's a very high value indication. So just get a bit of help while you're going through that if you can. There are lawyers who will do this at sensible rates for startups, and maybe you may have to give up a little bit of equity or future, you know, pay them in the future, but it is worth it. We will renegotiate some license agreements if it's an important enough deal, but it all kind of gives a picture of kind of poor execution and chaos if you're not careful. So it is a good thing to get right if you're, you know, we want to know what we're buying and what the story is around that. So it is quite important.
Okay, that's good advice. That's a mental thing.
Yeah, and I think another component of this is also many times the university maybe have an idea, a hypothesis that have been patented, or they have filed a patent application, but there is not supporting data for it. And I think as a pharma, it's also quite key for us when we assess these opportunities that yes, exactly everything that Tim highlighted is crucial and critical, but just having things on a piece of paper sometimes is not enough for us to engage. So any kind of supporting data, even if it is in vitro data, that's also fine. But at least that you did what we many times call the killer assay or the killer experiment to show that it actually holds out. Otherwise, it can also be hard to attract pharma for a collaboration.
Okay, the next question I have here is, could you give examples of types of deals with early stage companies where joint venture or co-developments are potential options? Is that sort of something any of you would be interested in, or not really?
I think co-development would be a bit hard for us, especially in the cardiometabolic space. It's hard to see that, right? But I mean, we would not take it off the table up front. I mean, it's also a dialogue, and it's a give and take, considering kind of the whole all the different aspects in the agreement, right? Equity is not a problem. We do that, and it's part of our kind of deal making, and it's not a problem at all.
I think maybe it can be
Go ahead, Susanna.
Thank you. I think just that sometimes it can maybe be challenging to see the benefits that entering a co-development with a recently started biotech, what that brings compared to, I'm just making my own comparison here, Roche that's been taking drugs or programs into the clinic for years, while the biotech needs to build up that infrastructure, hire the expertise, and maybe it's also a novel modality or a novel target that there is not much experience from. So it's also, there has to be attractiveness from both sides in order to engage in a co-development. Sorry, Phil, I was interrupting you.
You said a very similar thing to what I was going to say, so thank you. And my point really was, if it's an early stage collaboration, it is a long way away from commercialization. There's the expertise piece and there's the roles that we should play, but also it's a long way away from commercialization, and lots of things can happen and change. So that makes us, I'll say, reluctant to consider co-commercialization in an early stage deal. But maybe on a case by case, there might be a reason, but it's very rare that we would look at that in an early stage deal.
I would say it's become slightly more trendy to discuss this. I think maybe, I think in general we don't have a problem with companies sharing in long-term rewards for the innovation that they've produced. But the question is, why do you want to do that via co-development? Usually deals have a sort of downstream royalties and milestones package, and usually sometimes the co-development is more aligned with making sure that there's enough payout later on. It's just a term they use in lieu of that, whereas other companies are more serious about trying to build a development organization. So we have had a few slightly crazy discussions with tiny biotech companies wanting to do co-development deals where we've said, the marketing budget in year one's going to be 300 million. So, how are you going to raise that money? And, who are your experts that you use, and what's your global marketing strategy for this indication? And obviously that's not a discussion people can answer. I think it's just got a bit trendy. So as usual in these business discussions, try to keep things sort of, sensible. Everyone wants to win out of these things, but sometimes when it veers into these slightly unusual discussions, it can make any of us look a little bit foolish when you're asking for things you can't deliver. If it genuinely is an established company that possibly could do this, or they want to share fairly in downstream economics, then that's a slightly different bucket. But don't read this on Fierce Biotech and then tell your lawyers that you want to ask for this when you've got 5 people and 1 lab, because it's a very different game.
Okay, I think we've got about 5 minutes or so left, depending on if many more questions come in, but we have got at least one more question from the audience. Do you generally find that academic data is reproducible? Do you repeat studies in-house?
Let's be diplomatic and say it's on a case case-by-case basis, and at Roche we do reproduce the data internally or in-house before we enter into partnerships when it comes to assets. So MTAs, material transfer agreements.
I mean, really, I would say, is the question from someone in academia or just in general? Because
I don't know. I just have a name, Kevin Cox, but doesn't say where from.
Okay. I mean, if you're doing a deal with an academic, then clearly reproducing that early data is important. If it's a molecule, we do MTAs with biotechs to put it through some of our proprietary assays to, because sometimes it's context dependent. It's not just is it reproducible or not. It's how does the biology really perform in models where we've done a lot of standards and we know how other drugs perform and other proprietary sort of tools we have internally. So it's hard to answer the question. I mean, clearly there have been publications detailing a lot of research can be poorly reproducible, but good biotech companies will take those early signs of success and bring new molecules forward and show that it works more robustly or with more examples. And it depends what stage you're partnering at, what level of risk you want, and how much experimentation we would want to do internally. Clearly, if a drug's in phase 2 and it's already passed all of those hurdles, then we're not going to be reproducing preclinical data. So the question is very context dependent.
Okay. I have a very specific question here. Would you partner with cell therapy company firms who are going into phase 3? Would you consider that?
Just broadly, or I mean,
that's
it's
the question. Yeah,
very broad question, right?
I guess a lot depends on the details in that question.
Yeah, I can give a very generic answer. It's our partnerships are driven by the data at whatever stage of development it is, and if the data it looks good enough, it looks compelling, and then you've got the things like market unmet need, benefit to patients, etc. If those things all stack up, then I don't see why we wouldn't consider a late stage or an earlier stage deal in this space.
I think late stage collaborations are always attractive if the science and the data is right, as Phil say, but I'm also thinking another factor here when it comes to cell therapy is the manufacturing. It's not just a commodity that you easily can plug into, so that would also be a key component on how you have solved the manufacturing aspect.
Sure. So I think this is our final question. Can you point to a publicly available checklist listing what factors or documents, I guess, Big Pharma would look for in doing due diligence on a deal? Is there a resource that has that anywhere?
I don't. Oh, go ahead.
Go. You go, Miriam.
Okay, no problem. But I think I mean, we're happy to provide that. I mean, it's not any secret. I mean, it's a due diligence is a very exhaustive exercise of basically going through all the data that is available, right? So and we typically we're very upfront as for what documents we would like to see, and we have I don't think that's any secret. I think that's quite straightforward, really. So, but happy to I don't know who asked the question, but happy to guide that person through that.
But I think as part of a due diligence, it's not just biology we go through. I mean, it's all aspects of how you got to the asset or the platform where you are. It's medicinal chemistry, it's DMPK, it's tox, it's biology, and if you go into the clinic, it's the manufacturing formulation. All of those are quite key components. And then based on what the asset is, the scientist can sort of funnel in and narrow down on all sorts of different topics based on the data they see. So I think just be prepared to share all that you have and be transparent, and rather be transparent and also be willing and ready to share the bad things because we will find them one way or the other. but we do appreciate biotechs that just share upfront that we're struggling with this component, or this part is challenging for us, and we're happy to help you and try to figure out a path forward together. But I think key is just the transparency and the candid communication with the pharma and the biotech.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll help people see that journey coming, because we'll have been through non-confidential discussions, confidential discussions, bit deeper dives with more people coming, help for some of our governance presentations. But when it gets to formal due diligence, Lily, we don't just kick tires. That means we're seriously expecting to do a deal. So it will have representatives of all the main technical functions, independent of the project team that are doing the deal. So there, as Susanna said, there'll be people who are just experts in vitro biology or CMC, or as well as the people who know the actual project. And then there's a few hidden areas. Obviously, there'll be IP diligence, corporate diligence on the legal side, data security, lots of other bits, and sort of how the company is functioning on top. And we try to make it a positive experience, but it is obviously quite a substantial process because we are expecting to do the deal. So certainly, Lily, don't kick tires and just go to due diligence and offers for no reason. We bring in, these can be small teams in very early stage companies, and they can be almost 100-person team if there's a lot to look at. Depends on, and then obviously we would discuss the forward plans, and I think as Susanna said, any gaps or any inconsistencies, we will find them. We'll look at the stats behind the assays. We'll get into the weeds, but hopefully when we come out the end of it, there'll be a really good decision for both sides, and hopefully things will be as they seem. Always things come up. Hopefully they're not material things. They are things that can be. The reason we do it, actually, I should say that, is that we want to know what those issues are so we can plan to fix them quickly, so we can continue a smooth process in development. So nothing's ever perfect, but if we know that a certain area of technical issue is proving challenging and needs more resource, we can actually plan in the next stage to actually give it that resource to fix it. So we do need to know this stuff. But yeah, overall, we'll help companies see that coming in the earlier discussions.
Okay, so it sounds like the broad message for smaller companies that might want to partner with any of you is to be open and to approach you, and from the beginning, not necessarily expecting a deal, but to build these relationships. I think that seems like key takeaways to me. And I think we're out of time, so I'm going to hand back to Josh. If you have any more specific questions, there is the one-to-one platform, I believe. So yeah, thank you to all the panelists, and thanks for an interesting chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Madeleine. And yeah, thank you to our panel. Certainly one of the most active we've had. Tons of questions coming through there. I was struggling to keep up and make sure that we were getting everything across there. So thanks for all that. As Madeleine said, we do have the one-to-one platform to engage and book meetings with, I guess, the partners on the call, but also their teams who are also on the platform. So yeah, a huge thank you to Miriam, Susanna, and to Madeleine, and particularly also to Tim and Lily, who have been long-time supporters and partners of LSX for a long number of years now. And we heard from Johnson yesterday, and again Tim today, and also to Phil and MSD. We do have a break now, so maybe encourage people to check out the MSD Innovation Zone, which is at the top of your tab on the screen there, where you can see some showcases of early stage companies and spin-outs from university. We had some questions on that earlier, and indeed the rest of the showcase presentations from I think we have 160 odd from companies all over the world and in all different sort of indications and phases of development. So please do check all of them out as well. We're back at 4 o'clock, hearing from some more pharma heads. This time a little bit later stage, so we're focusing on M&A and sort of large-scale deal making in the space, from Alexion, BMS, Ben Thorner, Phil's colleague, and Ipsen as well. So please do join us at 4. A big thank you to all of our panel again. Please do keep on the conversations, the chat, and the engagement through the platform. And see you again shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.